Alright, at this point, we've removed the winch after getting it positioned just the way we wanted it. Removed it, reinstalled the wiring for the control module on the Warren winch, and then placed the control module on the top. It's just here loosely, and we've rubber banded it up here in order just to keep it out of our way. I've reinstalled all the mounting bolts to the cross beam, and now I'm just snugging them up. Now it's time to resecure the tow hooks to the cross members supplied by Rocky Road Outfitters. Using the supplied 3/8 inch hardware, we're going to do this. Now, there's something very important that you need to understand and you should take into account. There's an indexing tab on top of each of the tow hooks and a cutout where that indexing tab is supposed to set. These tow hooks are essential. They were provided by the factory in order to secure anything that you're pulling to the actual frame. And the cross member, as it is very structurally sturdy and very structurally sound. Nonetheless, the tow hooks themselves are also going to add added strength and security so that your cross member doesn't damage any of your frame. So I'm going to go through that with you here in just a moment. But the indexing tab needs to be pressed all the way securely against the back of the cutout before you begin to install. So I'm going to run this up a little bit, get it nice and close, and then I'm going to there. Now we can move on to the next one, and I'm going to show you how to adjust these tow hooks once you're finished. Now this is the second part of reinstalling your tow hooks properly. The reason this is so important is what we found is once we resecured the tow hooks in the front, we found that the tensioning nut on the back side was only hand tight. This bolt will no question fall off and get lost if you don't do this step. You're going to locate it through the wheel well, and on the driver's side it's behind the windshield wiper fluid, and on the passenger side it's right behind part of your air intake system. So as we do this, we're going to take a couple of takes on this. You're going to locate this right back inside here. It's a silver nut, pretty good size. Right now I'm using an 1 3/16 ratchet to access it. So once we located the nut and got prepared to do this thing, I reached up in, gave it a good hand tightening as close as I possibly could. There are a couple of pipes and tubes that are in your way, but if you use the proper equipment, you can get to it pretty easily. I hand tightened it just as tight as I possibly could. Get up in there with that ratchet. I may have to use an extension. It's a fine thread, so you're going to have to run it up quite a ways. You may need to add another extension, but nonetheless, this particular nut needs to be very tightly secured. One of the things that did occur to me as I was tightening down these tow hooks was that it is a fine thread on the back side of that, and so you're going to get a lot of mechanical advantage as you're tightening that up. As before I mentioned, it needs to be very snug, but it's not something that I would tighten up to the point where you're really reefing on it, because those fine threads are going to give you an enormous amount of mechanical advantage. So get it nice and snug. I don't know what the torque spec is, but that to me seems like it's have the winch installed, the tow hooks back in place, it's time to reinstall the horn on the front of the vehicle. And now we're getting ready to move into a part of this installation that's a little bit dicey. The reason I say that is because if you really want to make a very clean installation, it's important to get these holes cut and all of the cutouts in the proper places. This is the part that gets really difficult. Now, if your vehicle is equipped with a license plate holder in the front, that's the first thing you want to take off in order to get access to the bumper and start cutting holes. Now that we're ready to start cutting holes that are going to be permanent, I'm going to give you a few tips on orientation, how this stuff goes together. It's kind of difficult to tell in the instructions. As you can see, I've got the winch controller banded up here out of the way, and everything's pretty much out of the way. The bumper, as it were, would be remounted like this. I'm going to take it out, turn this guy around, and the area that we're going to be working on right now is the plastic piece that holds all of the fog light wiring to the bumper fascia. And I'm going to give you a bit of a close-up and an idea on how to remove this. Here we are with the fascia set on the ground, and it's turned around. This is the bottom of the fairing in your grill. I found it easiest to work from the bottom side first. There are small tabs here along this section. This is what we're taking out, and I've left the wiring in place for now because it's going to be much easier to take out once this is loose. Just using a flathead screwdriver, I'm going to work my way across that bottom. There seems to be 4 tabs. Once I've got that bottom, I'm going to start working on the top. As I'm working across the top portion of the piece that holds the fog light wiring, it's not been made to come apart very easily, so it does take a little finesse and a little bit of elbow grease. I'm using a small screwdriver to wedge in and get some action on that. As I come in, these push tabs, I've got to kind of force it in, pop it out, give it a little bit of a pull, and it starts to snap away from itself. All right. Now that we've gotten this, the wiring harness holder removed, I'm going to turn it over like this, and you can see now we have to remove the push pins that are holding the wiring harness in place. These things are really hard not to damage, but you need to do your best. On the one that has a nice slot in it, if you turn it sideways, they usually come out pretty easily. Other than that, I've got a small screwdriver, and I'm really going to be patient and take my time and try to get these worked out without damaging the push pin itself, because we may reuse them down the road. They just take a little patience. You've got to work it in and work them out of their holes. Before we move forward with cutting holes in the plastic crosspiece and fascia, we need to reassemble some of the parts that we loosened before in order to access the bolts used to secure the cross member and winch mount. This piece right here, this assembly that is the hood bumper, need to be put back in with the number 10 millimeter bolt that was supplied. We're going to put that back in place. It takes a bit of finesse, but what I found is an extension helps quite a bit. A couple of tips that might help when positioning the plastic crosspiece as you drill the holes. I found that using a universal automotive clip on the tab that is provided, on this particular model, it wasn't provided with clips. I happen to have this around, and underneath the headlight and back behind the headlight, there's a spot that looks like it was originally meant for a clip. I just took the universal automotive clip, stuffed it in, and repositioned the plastic crosspiece temporarily while we mark. Once the plastic crosspiece is temporarily fastened in place, we're trying to find out where the holes belong. We use this rectangular hole in the center of the plastic crosspiece as a reference for centering. From the bottom of the new winch mount and cross member, I find that the holes that we're supposed to be locating are 7 inches from the center to the outside, which on this particular indentation and stuff is about right on. The bottom hole that we're trying to reach is roughly 2 1/4 inches, and it happens to be right at the corner of this. And then the next hole that we're trying to locate is 5 inches up from the bottom of the cross member, which is right in this place. I've used a wax pencil to locate where these are so I can see where they are. I got a drill and drilled some pilot holes so that we can, on both sides, so that we can locate those holes. And now I'm going to use a hole saw in order to drill those holes. In this process, we've also taken this opportunity to trace out the fair lead hole in the plastic crosspiece. This is going to need to be removed in order for the winch line. Now that the plastic crosspiece has been removed and the universal clips taken back off, I'm using a cordless cutout tool, and you could use maybe even a fine tool or anything to cut out this the hole for the fair lead. Been cut out now, and I originally drilled the pilot holes in order to give me some place to start with my hole saw. I did find that it was very difficult to reach those from the front, but it was much easier since I did have my pilot holes, which was really great. I could do this from the back side, and it keeps everything nice and centered. Once you've drilled your holes in your plastic crosspiece and cut out your fair lead hole, you want to reposition it in order to make sure that everything lines up. At this point, I've reattached the plastic crosspiece into the fairing, and I've used a smaller hole saw and been very careful to make sure and drill some pilot holes where the new holes are going to be once we turn this thing over. Now be careful, if you had a license plate mount on the front of this thing, the holes for the mount might be a little misleading. I've had to drill a new hole to fit well with inside the fair lead hole, and I'm going to turn the bumper over again and re-drill all these holes. Make sure you know which one you're supposed to be using. At this point, I've used a grease pen to identify all the pre-drilled pilot holes that I'm going to use to drill the holes.